Hey LaDonna, it's Dr. Scott has some feedback for you on your IRB application. Just going to go through both documents and mention the things that are either confusing or vague that need a little bit more explanation. And then there's some parts where I think you need to explain a bit more. But overall, I think you have a solid structure here to begin with. So we'll start with the IRB form. Everything looked good for the most part on the first page, except this reference down here to where the how you're going to recruit people, and you mentioned that you're going to provide a study room in the library where interviews will be conducted. I think you'll want to be this really, like, the location of where this happens doesn't really need to be on the recruitment, but I do think you want to kind of think through like what that process is going to be like. So you get flyers out there with your contact information, and then you're hoping that they'll contact you, and then you'll set up a time to do an interview, or you're going to just have a room in the library that you'll be in and people can just drop by. That kind of needs to get cleared up. I think like you arranging an interview is probably going to work better than just hoping that people show up. All right. I do think there's a slight risk of psychological harm. Like, we're doing expedited out of what I'd call an abundance of caution. We might get away with an exempt for your study, but just in case that there's a risk of psychological harm, like somebody, you might have a participant said, I left my previous school due to an abusive relationship or due to sexual assault. I think that you need to leave open the possibility that there might be a slight risk of psychological harm. And I think you'll want to mention that in your explanation below, and also mention how you're going to address that, like what you're going to do in case that comes up. I think that chapter on research ethics in Cresswell is kind of important, but also kind of thinking about what you'll do if a participant has this issue. Actually, you know what? I want to go to the recruitment. I want to go back to that here really quickly. If you know people that are transfer students, like, I think Cresswell's snowballing technique might prove better than you just throwing some flyers up and hoping that people participate. Students are really busy, and it's going to be hard to kind of get the number of participants that you need to do a good study if you're just kind of hoping that some will show up. So if you know that there are some in some classes you've been in, like in the English and Humanities department, and they're willing to chat with you, like, I think that that might be a better approach than just kind of hoping that folks will show up. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So in talking about the risk of privacy, or a privacy breach, I think you'll need to be a little bit clear about what it is you're going to do. So all recordings will be deleted once the study is over, and descriptions and names of the participants will be changed. I think you mean it'll be changed in how you write up your findings, and that makes sense. You'll just kind of need to make that a little bit clearer. I also think you need to explain what's going to happen with the informed consent forms and how you're going to keep the pseudonyms and the informed consent forms kind of like separate. Like, what's that process like? So once they sign off and they got consent, you got their name and contact information. What do you do with that? That needs to get cleared up here in 4B. In 5, it asks benefits the research to the scientific community. There are places here in the gray highlighting, I use that when the wording is kind of confusing. It will have a certain take on the transfer student issue that may not have been taken before. I'm not sure what you're getting at there. I also think you need to kind of explain a little bit what a phenomenological study is. A lot of the people in IRB, they're very familiar with research, but it's usually quantitative, like survey research. They're familiar with qualitative research, and I think if you use that term, it might go over a little bit better. And you can still use both, but you'd say this is a qualitative project using a phenomenological methodology, where the phenomena I'm seeking to learn more about is like the transfer, and what happens in that transfer. Okay. I think also this is pretty vague down here at the end. We'll also provide information about transfer students from a certain university that may apply to other universities as well. Like, I think I get what you're saying. So it's like, if we can learn more about the struggles transfer students have, we can maybe have better strategies for retaining those students, helping them succeed, helping them complete classes, but also just have a better experience on campus. I get that after kind of thinking about it a little bit, but it needs a little bit more clarification. I don't think you need to, I think to look over, the word you probably want is review before they sign it. And then I think that's it for the IRB application. All right, let me pause this really quickly, and I'll have your summary review question, or your summary questions up here in a second. Okay, so I have a few minor wording issues to think about, and then I have some like bigger questions that are going to need a little bit more writing and a little bit more explanation. So entering a new facility, let's just be a little bit more specific. We're talking about transfer college students, so entering a new college or university. It looks like you're using APA format, which is great. I think that makes the most sense. When you do that, Lucas, we usually do 2011 or something like that. So you just want to make sure that you're staying consistent. And you do that down here with Matthews, which is awesome. Research study, the two are a little bit redundant. So this research or this study will be used to uncover. It's up to you. And then I was kind of curious, the questions that you have here. I was curious like why we're focusing on the difficulty like transferring credits, and like is that maybe the phenomena that you're getting at, that you're assuming that transfer students have had some difficulty transferring credits over, and you want to get them talking about their feelings or their responses, their reactions to that difficulty. That's interesting, and I'm just kind of curious, like you have a couple questions in here about that, and I think that that's I kind of want to know more about why that's important. I don't necessarily know if you need to clear that up here in your summary, but I was kind of curious about that. Maybe that's something we can talk about on Monday. So, and then also kind of like this, it's maybe a little bit more colloquial, or like if you're talking, you might talk about research questions I've come up with, but I think if you just leave it at best answer the research question, period, I think that's a little bit more succinct and clear. One thing I didn't see you do here or in the IRB application is refer to Cresswell, and I think you kind of need to, especially when we start talking about methodology and analysis. So for this phenomenological study, I'm relying on Cresswell, who says these things. I think actually mentioning the dude makes some sense, because that's what you've kind of borrowed from in order to create your project. I'm not sure about the answer to the question that I have here, and I'm going to send this document to you. It's got notes over here on the side with, it's just reminders for me, and I'll send this to you. But I have one note here about the interview protocol, and I'm not sure if you need to have that ready when you submit to IRB. And I've emailed the IRB chair, and I'm waiting to hear from him, and he'll let me know if you need to have that. But if you do, by the end of next week, this upcoming week, you need to have that ready to go. Okay. So seems like a word's missing there, and I don't know if you even need that parenthetical. Like maybe you could just leave that out. I also change the names of the participants. I think what you mean is I will change the names of the participants, or assign them pseudonyms when I'm writing about them. I think that's, you're not literally going to change their names, although that'd be kind of fun. All right. There's some details that are definitely needed here in the precautions section. I think you do need to mention whether or not your phone is password protected, whether it's encrypted, whether or not you'll maybe download those files. It might be easier to say that you're going to download the files onto a password-protected computer. You also need to acknowledge where you're going to keep your informed consent, your signed consent forms. And I think you could say that it's going to be my office. And I think you also need to articulate how long they're going to be there. And I think you can say they'll be there for 2 years, and then I'll take care of shredding them. So, a little bit confusing here. I think, again, Cresswell, you need to refer to him, especially that chapter on coding. Definitely more details needed in this section in order to kind of flesh out exactly what it is you're going to be doing. So much more writing needed here, much more writing needed here. And you need more explanation here about the precautions section. So I think you got a good structure here. I think more description and explanation is kind of needed. But that's where you're at, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you tomorrow. Bring any questions you have about this or your literature review, and we'll get you on the right path going into spring break. I'll talk to you soon, LaDonna.